Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming to join. We're going to take another minute or so, just let a few other individuals jump on. I'm Adriana with CyberSN. So we will be taking 1 minute.
I can't see. Oh no.
All right.
Recording in progress.
Oh.
That was me. Of course it was.
It is such nice weather out.
Isn't it? Okay. So we will take a few more minutes. Thank you, everybody who's joined so far. All right, so we're going to get started. So individuals will probably join as we kind of go through. It is being recorded, so we can go back to this and listen back. I know that it's probably some of the benefits of being virtual, but I appreciate who's joining today so far. So our discussion today in regards to cybersecurity is really going to be focused on a perfect storm. So we have some wonderful professionals that are joining us to describe some of the tales from the trenches. So through 2020, there has been a significant effect within the cybersecurity community. And, with a lot of changes with remote workforce, rush to digitalization, shifting responsibilities, cybersecurity burnout, and really the refocus on supply chain results from different SolarWinds breaches has really created the perfect storm for attackers and defenders. So this panel will focus on emerging threat vectors, attack surfaces and tactile strategies for defenders are leveraging to address perfect storm conditions. So I'll reintroduce myself. I am Adriana with CyberSN. So I am the managing director of the Northeast. So I provide expertise in hiring for cybersecurity professionals in the industry. I have been here for 5.5 years, and I felt that it's really important to leverage the relationships that I've grown and developed over the years and utilize the professional expertise of these relationships to help and give back into the community. And I think that it's important that I'm able to leverage those relationships to now bring you, talented individuals to help support and answer some questions, around these, different effects of cybersecurity and what has transpired within 2020. And, really give one another the advantage of kind of asking questions and hearing others, struggles and also things that they've overcome and supporting of one another. So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and first introduce Mark Arnold. So Mark Arnold joins us from LARS. So Mark, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yes, Mark Arnold. I am VP of Advisory Services at LARS. We've built our reputation in the community on red team, blue team, and purple team. We have a strong adversarial engineering practice. I was brought on to help build out our vCISO practice, in which we tie our program dev back to our core practices. And so that's who I am.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Moving on to Jennifer Mansour. She is currently employed with Crane Co. So Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about your background?
Sure. So thank you for having me. And so I started my career with Exelon Corp, just under a decade working there, creating insider threat and risk programs. And then I moved over to the government and managed their cyber threat intelligence and insider threat program. Then now I'm at Crane and I manage their insider threat program. And what Crane does is multiple silos of engineering and aerospace, manufacturing and so forth. So having the time of my life there, it's an amazing company. We're seeing a lot of insider threats that we're handling, but that's where I am now.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And then in addition to that, we also have O'Shea Bowens. And O'Shea is the founder and CEO of No Hat Security. He also has podcast. He's, I would say everything and then some he is doing. So O'Shea, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Adriana. Yeah, I'm O'Shea Bowens, as Adriana mentioned, founder and CEO of No Hat Security. So most of my days are pretty much focused on the C&D aspect of cyber. So a lot of threat hunting, security analytics, a bit of threat intelligence. And recently, with the formation of the company, moving more towards training of how do we identify and bring about the next, that cyber army that we need to combat, this drastic drought in numbers for individuals to help really, fight the good fight. So helping identify and train individuals to move into cyber, career transitioners, and train teams with simulations. So really just, yeah, as Adriana mentioned, my whole life is pretty much cyber. So outside of No Hat, run podcasts, started a conference called SkiCon that'll kick off in 2 months. Lots of nonprofit stuff. So I just really enjoy, the world of cybersecurity and technology. I have since I was 14. So happy to be here and happy to share my thoughts.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So we're going to get started. So we're going to kind of dive into each topic at a time. And with that, we're going to let each panelist kind of give their insight to each of those questions. And then we're going to open it up to questions. Questions are going to be done where if you could just simply chat those through to everybody, and I will go ahead and get it, through as many as possible. If we don't get to your question, we will have the panelists answer those at a later time, and we'll make sure to get all of that to you. Just so everything can kind of be transparent and you can, really get everything that you need answered in a timely manner without taking up too much of our time today. But with that being said, we're going to go into one of our first topics. So as we know, 2020 had its share of notable cyber events and breaches. The industry's reaction to the pandemic, continued increases within phishing attacks, successful ransomware attacks that have been pretty pronounced within the public eye, social engineering, Twitter employee, data breaches, and then the SolarWinds supply chain attacks are a few highlights to name within 2020. So we understand that threat vectors and attackers' techniques will continue to increase and evolve. So my question to the three of you are, how do you stay current with evolving threats, significant, changes in 2020 and their impact on your companies or even clients? And are there any specific, experiences that you can share? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with Mark. So Mark, can you go ahead and kind of dive into that for us?
Sure. We've been staying current recently by mining GitHub for attack techniques. Yes, I know I'm not, just the Twitter thing, combs Twitter for such things, but I can tell you we've been collecting a lot of things on GitHub. Not only are we looking at GitHub, but attackers and nation states are looking at GitHub for the latest attack tactics and techniques. And so we get ahead of that, or incorporate some of what we're seeing there. I leverage Medium a lot as well, because a lot of research folks are using Medium as their blog interface. And so you see a lot of interesting insights there. We've just noticed as well, Google just released an article that shows that nation states are targeting researchers directly now. So, yeah, you can go to GitHub, but if you're a researcher, they're going right toward the researcher, trying to social engineer researchers to get at their attack research. From a threat intelligence perspective, I often reference Florian Ross APT threat intel sheet on Google's kind of free. We've seen other big companies like Nation State actually use that to build out their threat intelligence practice as from a source of freely available information. I spent a lot of time on Micro's attack site for latest tactics and techniques. If folks haven't seen the CyberWar site, please go there. There's tons of attack case studies and information there. Bellingcat is another a site I followed from an investigation, online investigations. Stanford Internet Observatory with Alex Stamos, Renee DiResta, all. If you think about the larger context, so there's attacks and there's the context for attacks. So I look at both of these types of resources. I've just finished a cohort at Harvard on cybersecurity and the intersection of policy. So I'm also looking at the larger global context, global markets, that form the context for some of these attacks. And so I'm listening to folks like Nicole Poroth on Twitter, Kim Zetter, again, Renee DiResta for some of these resources to kind of predict or kind of stay engaged into how these attacks are forming in the larger context.
Great. Awesome. Any specific threats or experiences that you've had in 2020?
We don't have them, particularly from the standpoint of our company. We are taking what we see in these attack contexts in the sites that we mine to stage our own attack methodologies and to evolve how we're doing some of that. A lot of stuff that we do is also custom based, and so we're trying to figure out, what are the trends as folks have moved their environments, moved their infrastructures in the context of this protracted pandemic, and so nothing really that we've not seen happening in the wild that we're not already building out or evolving in our own labs.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. So moving on to Jennifer. So Jennifer, same question for you. How do you stay current with these evolving threats?
Yeah, so how we do, it's actually the cyber program that does that. I look more toward the insider threat piece to it, but we're partners in that when it comes to CTI. So what we do is look on, just like Mark said, we do Twitter and we do Instagram and we have Google alerts and mainly recorded future. You see those vulnerabilities out there. We may need to be on that immediately, jump on it. You have your Microsoft vulnerabilities that come out every Wednesday and Monday, and we jump on that as well. So there's always vulnerability assessments that are going on to protect ourselves from that. But from our people going in-house and in offices to home, it is very important that we educate our employees and our associates, because this is all new for us. This is all new for them, even though it's been a year. We need to educate on simple things like router protection and email, phishing, vishing. So our education piece has gone through the roof. We have been educating, probably putting out little things and little tidbits and tips every week. And we have a monthly cyber education that goes out that's mandatory. So educating our employees on simple things is so important to us. So we've been seeing a lot of phishing emails, just to get to the other part of the question, a lot of phishing emails. And to understand those phishing emails, you have to go through the headers, right? It's just simple, looking at that and seeing where those domains are coming from and maybe blocking them. So that again is like a partnership with cyber threat intelligence and the SOC. So that's kind of what we're seeing is the rise of different types of phishing. COVID vaccines for free. Come and get your free this or that. So, or your shipping is here. Your free testing kits. So we're seeing a lot of that come in. It's blocked, but we also want to know a little bit more about it and where it's coming from. So we can block that domain if need be.
Great. That's great. And any specific threats or experiences that you've encountered, this year that you can share, or, I know it's challenging to, kind of open up, but anything that you've experienced directly.
Sure. So typically the typical things like the SolarWinds and all that stuff. We see those typical things, but I'm and my team are more in the weeds regarding trying to discover what are the risks that our associates are experiencing and, putting the company and themselves at risk. So like password violations, keeping passwords on their desktop, stuff like that, instead of where they should be in a storage password manager, stuff like that. So just trying to protect the inside. So protect our associates from doing things that can make us vulnerable.
Great. Awesome. All right. And off to you, O'Shea. So tell us a little bit about, kind of how you're staying current and maybe some of the specific things that you've experienced in 2020.
Yeah. So I think Mark and Jennifer they said two key things that kind of made my ears perk. One around education and CTI, right? So, and we'll focus on the CTI aspect first. So I think what I began to embrace a couple of years ago, which I think from a broader perspective, you've begun to see more industries, different, pretty much almost every vertical begin to undertake and shift money towards, is really moving from, how do we leverage our CTI? How do we leverage CTI no matter what vendor, I won't go into that, what vendor we have, and replicate that across our environment, right? So this is where you begin to enter this, purple teaming realm, right? I hate not to go into the colors aspect of this, but what the reason why this is important, I think, and this is what, I express to clients, and this is one of the areas that, I help clients kind of work out, is really, it's one thing to read and understand what attackers are leveraging and the techniques that they're leveraging against verticals, especially something that's more relevant to you. It's another thing to replicate that and prep up. So when I say prep up, I mean, like, how do you ensure that the SOC can engage attackers in that area of the battlefield, right? How can you ensure that your tooling is up to date to catch some of the techniques, and monitoring detection is at a level that I'm not one of those people that thinks you're going to block everything. I think that's like crazy talk, but I do believe there is living in the realm of time of reducing the time to detect is an area where you win, right? So when you're thinking about how do you stay current, I think taking the time to really properly ingest and vet the intelligence that you're receiving, and then leveraging that from like a purple team and assessment perspective, where you're replicating those attacks on the simulation side of things. So not only do you understand that, I'm a financial institution, APT 22 is, they're super active again. And they've rolled a couple banks or they've successfully breached a couple different banks, and that's scary to read about. But you have to move to an actionable perspective, right? So yeah, it's scary to read about that, but what the heck are you doing about it? And engaging, different firms. There's a lot of different firms out there. I think Layers does this too, Mark. I'm gonna throw that out there for you. But engaging different firms around, simulating those attacks within your environment, and then really truly testing your colors, right? Testing your metal to determine like, hey, can we actually catch this? And if we are catching this based upon information we're receiving from our CTI vendor, our tooling stack, communicating with our vendors to ensure we have the latest up-to-date signatures, ensuring that we understand how to build out more custom signatures and detection, and really, ensuring that management understands this aspect of it. I think it's, a lot of us that are techies and geeks and, hands on keyboard, we get caught in our own world of, we know what we can detect and what we can't detect, but is that being reflected, or is that being pushed up the chain of management to ease their worries and to ease their fears? And I think when you look at that from an overall perspective of, hands on keyboard to communication to facilitation of those actions, throughout the entire company from upper management, you're in a much better position to accurately assess, what you can do, how you fight back, and really your preparedness, right? Preparedness is key. So really embracing, engagement, away from, not taken away from red teaming. I think red teaming is still super important, but I think what's more relevant nowadays is your ability to detect and defend. And to do that, you have to test your own defenses. You have to continuously do this. This isn't something that should be done, once a quarter. It is something where anytime you receive relevant information from your CTI provider, of really asking yourself what's important to us and how the heck did we find that within our environment. So I think that's a really solid approach to staying current with, the current attack, with the attack landscape.
And before we move on, I just want to go back to both O'Shea and Jennifer, and kind of I want to stress this notion of public policy. Maybe Jennifer can speak to this coming from government side. I felt at this stage of my career, career in security, that we do focus a lot on people, process, and technology, tactics, and techniques, but we don't understand the larger concept of public policy, cybersecurity, cyber war doctrine, and how that comes to play on why we are doing, these awareness initiatives, why we're doing the purple teaming, why we're doing the insider threat. There are larger narratives at play that are kind of, dictating why we are making some of the moves that we are inside of our organizations and environments.
Yeah,
I believe that intersection between policy and cyber is important.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Even with private corporations, we still look to the NIST and the NISPOM, which if you have not read it, please do. It gives you why we do what we do. And, even though it's a policy, for government, we as corporations can utilize those techniques to protect our industries and our people.
Great. And then O'Shea, you wanted to finish, kind of the second half of, the first question. So I know that you wanted to.
Well, yeah. So I know a lot of I can't go into too many details with some of the things we've done with clients, but something that I noticed around Q3, Q2 of last year was, and this could be, my big mouth. I'm constantly talking about, testing your metal and actually, engaging in more purple teaming, because I believed in purple teaming for like the last 6 years. It's just, I think a lot of the industry is catching up to this. What I saw within customer environments, from, actually, moving from actionable intelligence, right? So taking what you have from your intelligence provider to really, vetting that across the entirety of your organization, was really thinking about, okay, well, we know what this particular threat looks like. How do we find out what our tools, how our tools stack up against this, right? So a person like myself or Lairs coming in and sitting down with management, CISOs, deputy CISOs, whoever that may be, and really asking really two key questions. One, how are you vetting the intelligence that you're receiving? And then two, how often are you actually, leveraging that from an intelligence lifecycle perspective against your tool sets, right? And last year was this really, due to COVID, and I'm sure we're going to go into this later, you saw the attack landscape essentially shift inside of, 2 months, right? It took a week or two after WHO began to publicly announce some of the research that they were conducting, that you saw phishing websites being stood up or watering hole sites being stood up and phishing attacks relevant to, offering medication for vaccines or whatnot. So a lot of organizations went directly into this almost panic and verify mode. Panic because it's scary, because now we have a remote workforce, but also verify in regards to like, okay, we're spending millions of dollars on our security program. How do we begin to determine what sticks and what doesn't? And I think that's carrying over into this year. At least that's what I'm seeing from some engagement. That's being carried over into this year, as you know, the mindset for managing remote workforces is not going away anytime soon. Let's just be honest. No matter how many people get vaccinated over the next couple of months, there's still going to be a massive amount of people working from home. That's going to be a norm. So really thinking about, where do we shift our focus in regards to like covering our remote workforce is it's something that I've kind of seen over the last, I don't know, 8 to 9 months.
And O'Shea, that's great. That actually transitions us to our second question. So, moving on to that. And again, if you do have any questions in regards to the first kind of panel question, feel free to put those in the chat and we will get to them at the end. With that being said, though, we're going to roll into our second question, and that's really around digital transformation and remote workforce. So we all know that, that was a major shift for many companies, right? And, they were minor adjustments for others, but it really has impacted us. So how has those changes in 2020, changed like threat vectors, attack surfaces, and, share how to address these changes, or maybe how you've addressed it, or, in conversations with, other professionals, how they maybe have like any advice and kind of guidance behind that. So,
ladies first. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, well,
great, Jennifer, go for it.
I appreciate that. So just something as simple as strengthening home network, because this shift went to home, right? Like most of these our employees are working remotely. So something simple as changing your router security, putting another level on there, or suggesting that our employees put another level on there, changing the router password. If a hacker comes in and knows your IP, they can go into the admin setting and put their own, put your, what everybody has is admin mostly. If you haven't changed it, it's probably your password is admin. So just educating your employees to say, change your admin password, because they can access everything if they can get in through that. So again, I'm going to go over and over. Education was part of our initiative when we knew that shift was going from the office to home. There were so many different things that we don't think about that make our employees very vulnerable because they're not cyber experts. So we need to educate them to say, think about this, think about your social media. You can get phished through social media, change your passwords there. Also, be careful of phishing attacks through social media, because how much time do people spend on social media now? Just hours and hours a day. I see it through activity on our endpoints is about, every employee is going on, checking on their Facebook and accepting new friend requests and Instagram and so forth. So just making them aware that phishing can happen, not just through emails, but through social media. And that's simple stuff that we take advantage of, and we know, but our employees may not know.
I've noticed definitely the increase in the text messages that I get where those phishing attacks, and I'm like, I just can't believe the amount that has come in on a day-to-day basis. And it's primarily around like Amazon. It's around my shipping. And it's not even Amazon. It's all around my shipping. And it's insane about like delivering in your packages and these things and that. And I'm like, holy moly.
Adriana's done a lot of shopping.
And to kind of double down on what Jennifer mentioned in regards to kind of the shift and with education, I think this is what's happening right now is essentially kind of the effect of us front loading, our defensive posture, for years and years and years, right? If you think about, when you're building out a security program, right? What were some of the key items that you always needed? Of course, you needed firewalls, right? You needed some type of IDS or SIM. And then over the last couple of years, you saw the rise of EDR or NDRs. But how do you approach that from a remote workforce perspective, right? Because front loading only works if the employee is like actually on the VPN, right? So thinking about home networks, well, it's super, super simple to attack someone at home if someone's not already in their networks, right? And I know for a fact there are groups of individuals out there that are, whatever you want to call them, cyber actors, black hats, whatever you want to say, that have already taken that mindset of, all I need to do is attack the home, right? If I can get inside someone's home, all I need to really do is it's 2 steps: wait till they're off the VPN, and then essentially either fish them from a personal perspective and land on their box, or find another perspective of actually of sniffing traffic on that home network, right? And what's your defense after if an employee is not on the VPN, right? You're now relying upon EDR, NDR, one of those solutions, but we know for a fact, just over like last year, you saw certain EDR companies where there were evasion techniques to essentially walk around the capability of that EDR solution to actually do what it's supposed to, right? It should be detecting anomalous activity either in disk or in memory. And there are definitely attacks out there. I know of a couple, I'm not going to say it off the top of my head, where there's certain EDR vendors you could literally walk around the monitoring aspect of those. So, thinking about, how you can actually shift your mindset from a security program perspective to detect these type of things. I think this is where you really have to rely upon, correlation. Correlation is key at this point. So it's not only you from a security analytics perspective, or from a SOC perspective, having your team review alerts based upon EDR. You need to start grouping together lots of different data sources and log sources from your Splunk, from Devo, whatever you're using. I mean, when I say log source, I'm thinking, okay, great. Do we have proxy logs? Do we have firewall logs? Do we have those? Do we have EDR, NDR logs? If you're lucky and you've deployed something where you can actually take with like a sysmon configuration, and you can actually get information from what's actually happening on disk and what's happening physically on the machine, and begin to put all these areas together. So if one is X'd out, so when I say X'd out, I mean, let's just say EDR isn't firing off, you may be able to detect some anomalous activity around authentication or layer 3 traffic, networking traffic, based upon that individual's normal baseline of activity, right? Like, why is Mark logging in at 2 a.m. From China on the VPN today versus yesterday? He was in Boston, right? We're not seeing anything from the EDR perspective. And if you were to take that approach and only kind of focus on one data source, and then walk away from either a positive or negative alerting aspect, you may miss something, right? Because attackers aren't just thinking about, one source of evasion. They're trying to couple together as much as they can to walk around your defenses. And being that your employees are at home on their home networks, like Jen mentioned, having those default configurations on routers and switches, educating them is, and I don't see this a lot actually, but educating them is super, super key. A lot of those, whether it's AT&T, T-Mobile, whatever it is you're using as your ISP at home, there is years and years of information out there around attacking those devices. And it's not that difficult. 14-year-olds pull this off with a simple Kali instance, right? So really coupling together different data sources to really think about, how can I cover my landscape as more employees are working remotely.
That's great.
You said a lot of things.
Go ahead, Mark.
You said a lot of things that triggered some thoughts in my head. Evolving a growing or newfound infrastructure or landscape, expanding landscape, getting around traditional infrastructure that we've invested in a lot. Early on at Laris, we did a lot of blogs on what we call hyperconverged networks or near networks. So maybe they're not going to target the user or the employees at home, but maybe they're targeting the schools at which their kids attend. So coming in, doing an end around, coming in through poor school district networks. So we did a lot of talk with Jake Coons at Risk-Based Security. We did a podcast on that, about the infrastructure now is not just the home network and the corporate network, but it also involves near networks like schools. So my sons are upstairs today because we've had 18 inches of snow. So they've got remote school today. My son wanted to jump on Microsoft to do Minecraft, during the time of this Zoom. I'm like, well, why don't you wait till after? But the larger point is, and O'Shea alluded to this, my son has a Kali Linux upstairs running on his super desktop, right? Say someone gets, around those, my normal defenses, they can hop on his box, use Kali to get back to whomever they need to. But this whole notion of this protracted pandemic kind of evolving our networks in ways that we never thought of, that we're also depending on the security of infrastructures that are near to our home networks. And so that's another vector that we kind of focused on early on in the pandemic. On the positive side of this, now that everyone has moved, to telework for the most part, we were able to actually go into our clients' engagements, without all of the hurdles and inhibitors, and kind of actually give real attention to those networks that were, that at one point have, tons of users and workers on those networks, and there's a lot of impedance, when you're doing some of that type of testing. The fact that they're all home, we now know what the choke points are, for certain corporations, and it's kind of evolved the way we've done some of our testing, given the pandemic. But yes, everything is becoming hyper-converged, which, to both Jen and O'Shea's point, requires more education as to how those networks have evolved. If it's a near network, what's the policy? What are the policies of that near network? What are the policies of my school district? Who are, to some degree, when my kids or my neighbors, through wireless maybe, what are the policies that those near networks have implemented to ensure that they're secure, and that when we're all on the same network, that we're all good net citizens, as it were.
I just want to add to that, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I did some reading over the past few months, and there was a study that went on that careless insiders make up 62% of insider threats. And that might be because of the lack of education, like Mark and O'Shea and I were talking about, but it's also lacks processes. And I think, not everybody knows all the policies. So it increased through COVID, 47% insider threats. And that is huge. And that's not because people are malicious. It's because people don't know the processes. So having a strong policy, for your endpoints and so forth, I think it's so important to put that out there so it's accessible to our employees. Again, through education. You're probably going to be sick of it. You're going to walk away from this meeting saying, I got to educate, but it's true. And having those strong policies in place.
Yeah, and we're going to jump into, we just got a question. So what's a medium-sized business supposed to do? In addition to education of their staff, how do they best use their providers to continue putting their practices in place?
So we need, I guess he or she can't answer this part, but I think, well, one, I'd have to understand kind of what's in place right now, but we'll go overall, right? Overall, it's really taking inventory of what you have to fight back with, right? So, forget tooling and expensive tooling. Let's get down to the basics, right? Do you have adequate asset management, right? Do you have, some type of audit around AD? Do you understand, what those authentications look like within your environment from a day-to-day perspective? And then if you don't have, again, I won't go into vendors. If you don't have XYZ type of tooling, what you're likely going to have to do is begin to paint a pretty broad baseline, 30, 60, 90 days, and really begin to analyze what that data looks like, and kind of and look for ROI there. I know this is a struggle with, a lot of SMBs around, well, I can't afford all these different things, so what can I do internally? There's a lot of tools that you're already leveraging that are built within your systems, especially around Windows, with user access controls and GPOs that you could leverage, today to essentially begin to lock down, workstations, lock down, probably the number one action that occurs once an attacker gets inside the environment, right? Moving laterally, right? So how can you begin to identify that with what you have? So look to, You know, Microsoft has loads of articles out about this. If you're really curious about, you know, understanding kind of the first couple of steps an attacker may take once they actually enter your environment, look at some of the techniques from MITRE. MITRE is one of the best resources in my mind as a defender out there that's free. Roberto Rodriguez, Cyber War Dog, he has a massive repository of just not only simple open source tools you can leverage, but also just research and white papers around, you know, building detection into your environment, honestly, on the cheap, you know. So look to leverage what you already have before you go out and you know, and feel the need to buy something. That's, you know, my advice without understanding the entirety and the scope and the tech stack of their environment.
Jen, you want to go or do you want me to go?
I was just going to say something very simple,
Go
is
ahead.
that Microsoft, you know, if you obviously have Microsoft and Exchange, it has built-in free tools within that. So explore that. Smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, you could utilize that. And the second point was know where your data is stored. Know where your, because that's really it. Know where your confidential and your proprietary information is stored and who has access to it. That was it. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry about that.
No worries. I think you both hit on something. You know, people and process is probably the most important than technology. Attackers are living off the land, right? They are more knowledgeable of what's on your network and using available capabilities within your own tooling to attack. Organizations, stakeholders, practitioners need to be aware of what those capabilities are in the tooling. I would say also from a program perspective, there are also freebies. O'Shea, you know, mentioned the freebies that are out there. The Center for Internet Security CIS 20 controls, not just the controls, but you should see the new tooling that's out there. There's the CIS Navigator, if you haven't seen it yet. It maps to 8 different frameworks, including the attack framework. So we're talking about a medium business. How do you right size for your business? Do you use the basic controls or the foundational controls or the organizational controls? You can simulate all types of program development, map those to, you know, to attack the CSF, PCI DSS, to kind of right size your approach for a roadmap based on, you know, your current state and where you want to target your future state to be. So there are a lot of free tools out there. This is one of them. CIS also just released their risk assessment document. So along with that navigator, when I think about that navigator, it reminds me of MITRE's matrices. I mean, all the community folks have begun to party their capabilities and tooling to make, you know, some of this accessible for all of us to kind of right size how we're, you know, thinking about going forward in the midst of an evolving threat landscape.
Great. That is awesome. We have a little bit of, we got about 15 minutes left on the clock. So want to keep ahead of the time here, but we do have a few more questions to go through in regards direct to the panel and then some questions from the audience. So on to the next question. So, you know, really following up on the changes within 2020, and we've touched upon, you know, a few of these, right? So really, there's clearly a focus on strengthening authentication and minimizing account takeover attacks, right? So we've touched upon, you know, the social networks, right? The Zoom invites, like these were a lot of things, a lot of people jumping in on Zooms that they're not supposed to be there and what have you, and, you know, gathering proprietary information that they shouldn't be getting shared. You know, in addition to that, combined with traditional phishing tactics to gain access to passwords, either for credential stuffing or remote access, you know, share some tactics you've seen attackers, you know, targeting credentials and how companies can address, you know, authentication attacks in 2021 and beyond. And let's start with Mark on this.
I have a feeling you start with me. So back, I mean, I thought about this looking back at our Laris top 10, and we don't like to use top 10 loosely because it's kind of misconstrued in this notion of top 10 list. But if you look at the 6 of the ways, we call them ways we've kind of offended clients or offended on engagements and been very adversarial. I would say 6 of our top 10 last year had to do with access issues, right? So
Mhm.
Kerber roasting, which has to do with AD, granting tickets. From our team, I heard that 90% of our engagements, we were able to get in, in environments that had Active Directory using Kerber roasting, which says that particular client has AD, but they don't have the right enrollment processes turned on. They don't have multi-factor turned on, or the appropriate lockout policies. The use of passwords versus a password vault that Jennifer mentioned earlier. There are some easy ways to mitigate that. Again, multi-factor, and even in some instances where there's multi-factor, we've been able to bypass multi-factor. So I won't get into all of that here, but that was last year's list. This year's list that's coming out in about a month's time. Again, access is about 60 to 70% of the issues that we're seeing in client environments. We're adding web app a little bit this go around as well, as a part of that adversarial chain of events that we use to get into environments. On the application side, maybe 80% of the ways we get in are through abusing access and credential boxes. Where it is the top thing that we are screaming at our clients to kind of do better at that. Even from a simple perspective, and all of us talked about this yesterday, we have clients who still keep passwords on an Excel sheet in Sharepoint.
Yeah.
I can tell you from a Larry's perspective, when I was a client 7 years ago, the first way they got us is the first thing they did was run a script on our SharePoint environment and found that password list. We're still finding that same password list in 2020, 2021. And so, again, education, it's the first thing that attackers, typically without no 0 days, no magic tricks. Let me find that password list. I'm gonna run a script. I'm gonna find it more often than not.
Yeah.
Great. And what's your take on that, Jennifer?
So, I am in 100% agreement with Mark there. Utilizing password vaults or password managers for your personal use, as well as, making that part of a policy, making sure no passwords are stored anywhere except for password vaults. But, something that we've seen last year, and I know everybody has heard this, Emotet, right? That was like big, and then it went down, and it went very quiet during the summer, and then it exploded a couple months later with a lot of new techniques, right? Like, so the old, you still have to worry about how they attacked. You still have to have that on your radar, those groups and the way they attack, those APTs. Just have them on your radar, because even though it's not as noisy, they come back. It is like a family member that just shows up once in a while, that you don't like. It always should be on your radar, even though there's new techniques and new malware that is coming out, and it's very fluid. But the old always comes back, and that's what I've noticed in the past year and a half, is that even though Emotet wasn't on our radar, because it's like old, we all have all those vulnerability scans and those signatures against that. No, it comes back, and it comes back in a stronger, different way. So having that on your radar continuously is important. Okay.
And O'Shea, we're gonna, finish off with this question with you. Again, time constraints. We have a couple more questions to get through. So, what's your stance here?
I think from an ATO perspective, you have to think a bit broader in regards like what attackers are really going after, right? You saw last year's a lot of targets, and we spoke about this yesterday. A lot of attacks, newer attacks that are specifically targeting repo and coding pipelines, right? So how can I begin to inject myself into maybe a specific library or dependency from a Git or GitLab, whatever you're using from a repository perspective. There were attacks last year where, attackers were really looking patch
Oh, we're losing you a little bit, Shay.
I was really interested too, man.
Oh no, we lost him.
Is he?
That snow has gotten all of us.
Yeah.
All right, well, hopefully he comes back. All right, so let's move, he might have to relog in. All right, so let's move on to the next question right now, and we'll let him finish when he gets back. All right, so he did have to drop. All right, so moving on. So the location of information, right, Jennifer, this is definitely something that I think is a great question for you, right? The location of information, access to data, threat vectors, the panel just mentioned, plus the supply chain attacks brought light with the SolarWinds breach, right, have shifted the importance of threat hunting in IR. And, you know, describe a few maybe threat hunting or IR preparation tips companies can use to address these evolving threats. You know, because I know you partner a lot within those groups, and
that is for sure. So again, like the landscape is so fluid, and knowing where your documents, your important documents and information are is key. And then writing, having our monitoring tools surround those. Let's say it's on SharePoint. You know, is it encrypted? Is it encrypted data that is on there? What about access levels? I mean, it's so important because sometimes, you know, I can have Mark go in last year because he's an engineer, but guess what? He's not an engineer anymore, and he's over in a different department, but he still has access to my confidential proprietary information within that SharePoint. So access levels are important, and having a process around that to monitor who has access to those SharePoints, that information is so important. You know, access levels to our monitoring tools or our AD groups. I mean, just constantly having process to audit that is important. So that, as well as we monitor our areas like our SharePoints, we have a algorithm that says, okay, Mark or O'Shea is accessing our SharePoint, but they shouldn't. That's not even their department. So having stringent, you know, walls around that or audits around that is important. That's what we utilize.
Great. O'Shea, I know you came back, so do you want to finish your thought? Oh, is he frozen again?
For a move.
Yeah, I think it's good now.
Okay, we're like, he's just not moving.
No. What I was just referencing was really looking at, you know, access controls around, you know, those coding repositories, right? Like you saw attacks last year where individuals were focusing on, you know, certain dependencies and vulnerabilities in certain frameworks, you know, like Java frameworks, and you know, if you know certain controls weren't locking down public access to those repositories, injecting malicious code into those repositories, and then as you deploy that within your environment, whether that's in the QA side or publicly facing, you know, you've essentially created that back door that allows an attacker access, right? So when you think about ATO, you know, begin to incorporate what are we doing from a repository perspective too. What are we doing to protect that? Is what I was going towards.
Great.
And then
we moved on to the next question, which is really to describe a few threat hunting or IR preparation tips companies can use to address, you know, these evolving threats over. So Mark, just kind of jump into you. So we're back onto that question. Any advice that you can give?
Again, I'll speak at it from a program perspective. Make sure you review your incident response plan. A lot of companies that we've gone into lately don't have that, so that's an issue, that nothing's there defining roles and responsibilities, communication protocols. You know, do you have a contact list for the relevant agency should something go amiss? Do you have all the right teams to marshal together when something does happen? You know, HR, legal, public relations, right? You know, how does all that happening. And I say that having been in a few instances where I've been a part of an APT attack, and I know how it's painful if there's not a program in place. So uh, review, make sure make sure you have the documentation in place, but not just that. TTX, tabletop exercises are key and should be top of mind for a company. Don't wait to get punched in the face. Prepare for that punch
Proactive.
prior to.
Absolutely. And then O'Shea, any thoughts on, different threat hunting or IR preparation tips companies can use?
In short, I think one of the best ways to stay prepared is to accurately assess, your environments. I say this a lot because that's what I focus on with a lot of my clients is really, sitting down, engaging, not only the red teaming aspect of this. It's great to have pen testers. That's wonderful. That's great. But this isn't, 2005 anymore. You have to have that ability to incorporate what your red teamers are doing or the outside consultancies that are focused on red teaming and couple that with your defenders, with your security team. So making this a normal exercise, I recommend, monthly, of having at least one resource. Maybe if you don't have a red teaming, budget, having at least one resource that's dedicated to like performing research for like maybe 20% of their role, and then taking that and applying that to practices within the SOC. I think that's a really solid approach, versus having
Great idea.
A specific tool.
Absolutely. And then, really to kind of finish things off, and I know that we're pushing 1 o'clock. So anyone on our panel, do you have the hard stop at 1? Can we get through the last question? Jennifer, you have a hard stop?
I do, but you know what? I'm okay. I'd rather be here.
Stay with the fun.
Well, we can just roll through it, really as like we've had a great conversation here, right? And I'm sure we could spend all day. And we started with the notion of a perfect storm, right? And the panels shared a large amount of information. And as the workforce remains remote, it's completely remote in some cases. And then it's also other organizations are beginning to return to the office, either part-time or completely back, on network, right? So we're transitioning there. Is a perfect storm, present for attackers to be successful? And, what would you like to share in kind of your closing thoughts about this, right? Are we giving them all of the opportunity?
I would say the opportunity has always been there. Like I'm not saying it as, like a smart aleck remark, but when you think about, just like breaches and a lot of attacks, this has been going on since like what, the 60s and 70s, right? Since, NoNet really became like, the de facto, and then that rolled out into like actually having the internet. In regards to answering the question around the perfect storm, I equate this to like, what you're in one of the best times in history as a defender, or with the capabilities to actually defend against a lot of attacks, right? So I think that perfect storm is really looking at all the resources that are available to you and utilizing those, so again, ignore price tags, but really thinking about what is available out there from a research perspective, what is available out there from a tooling perspective, and what have a lot of vendors, Microsoft really being kind of the leader here, what have a lot of vendors baked into their products that allow me to strengthen my defensive posture, right? Like, so I think we're like living in a great time to adequately, assess internally ourselves, right? What we can do and what our capabilities are. It's just, do we have the will, time, and resources to do that?
Absolutely. Jennifer, something to add?
Just a little tidbit. I mean, I think COVID has exposed a lot of our weaknesses, and I think we're better prepared going back into office and resuming normal life, even though studies show that 43% of the employees that had to work from home are going to probably remain home because businesses have shifted. But again, I think we have been exposed to a lot of our businesses, small and large, our weaknesses, and we were able to address them while on COVID and be very vigilant about it and learn how to deal with them. And so I think we're better off.
I appreciate that. So Jennifer, I know you have to go. So before we get to Mark, we're going to let you get to it. But we appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you so, so much. And we'll have additional questions for you to answer, I'm sure. And this is recorded, so it will be going out for individuals to still watch. So things will come in, I'm certain.
Super.
So have a great day. Thank you so much. So we're going to jump over to Mark. Mark, can you close us out with what your thoughts are?
So my thoughts are pretty simple. Can my PPT stand up against your TTP? So can my people, process, and technology keep pace with tactics, techniques, and procedures? We've learned that a lot of sloppy. Let me not be so offensive, but our practices have been such that the transfer from corporate home office to telework came with a lot of practices that hadn't been reviewed. So default passwords, lack of policy, and the like followed us from corporate to these home networks. And also the lack of being able to detect attacks quick enough. So O'Shea has been talking a lot about that. We're concerned about the next big thing. We have a case study that just happened, last week. Not necessarily a security case study, but if you all have been paying attention to Wall Street Bets and Reddit versus the hedge funds, right? Those guys found a vulnerability in the hedge fund practice, exploited it for a week or so, basically drove the rest of the markets down, drove the hedge funds down because they found a small vulnerability in some disclosure documents, amplified the attack using Twitter, Reddit, you name it. And then and Robinhood, I guess, is part of this conversation as well. All of these platforms were marshaled to attack the hedge funds based on a small vulnerability. And so I say all that to say that we have to understand better, what are our capabilities, what are our capacities, not necessarily the technology, but make sure that our PPTs are able to, do better and being prepared for the TTPs we see out there.
Great. That is so informative. We do have one question that came up. I believe it was to a previous, I missed it, but so he's asking, wouldn't a lot of these concerns be addressed in acceptable use policy and end user agreements? So this is more so an education around our end users. And, would there be a suggestion to go over those on a routine basis throughout the year? What would be the limit on how much to attribute to end users education and awareness? And I feel like, in my opinion, we're, heavily focused at my organization, even though we're staffing firm, right? But we definitely hold a lot of proprietary information, especially when it comes to cybersecurity professionals. And our cyber team has definitely focused on helping to educate us substantially. I mean, we are, really on a lot of topics. They do a lot of phishing campaigns with us. They educate us what to look for, what not to look for. So I simply say, the more, the better. And I think that's just from a user perspective, especially that I am not, technically savvy to a sense, right? Especially when it comes to cybersecurity. I'm not technically trained in a lot of the ways. So the support that I've been given has definitely allowed me to reflect on many different situations where I'm exposed to something that could create a vulnerability for myself personally, or even through my company. So I say the more education, the better. Making it optional, I don't think is something that should be given. I think that it is the safety for everyone involved. So I would say consistency is best, keeping somebody in that mindset.
Agreed.
So Mark, do you have a response to that? O'Shea?
No, I mean, I agree with everything you just hit there. I would say one maybe misnomer essentially with the end user agreement is really the end user agreements that you may be leveraging for education of cybersecurity practices. Let's just say, for phishing exercises, things along those lines, security awareness, drastically kind of differ from end user agreements of what tools and capabilities are around defensive your defensive tech stack. something I hammer home with clients is really, take your vendors to task, in regards to what they're providing, and really come to the table with an idea of what you need for your organization, because what you need for this specific vendor is different from what maybe one of your competitors needs from that specific vendor, right? And really take them to task on the output and the expectations on what should be caught, what isn't caught, things along those lines, really having those deep level conversations. I know it's not, it's not loads of fun reading through all the jargon that from those user guides you get from, a lot of the vendors, but there's golden nuggets in there that one, you can use to drive down prices if you're cheap, which I am. You can use to drive down a better deal, but also it helps you really understand how you fully maximize those products.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Again, from a program perspective, I've evolved on this. So a policy is not just a policy. A policy has degrees of state to them. So is it a formal policy? Is it an informal AUP policy? Is it written? Is it partially written? Thinking about how we do our assessments. So there's that state. Is there a control for that policy? Is that policy enforced? Would be the third question. And then finally, is there governance management for that policy? We have a lot of policies in organizations, but there's a disconnect between the group that's responsible for the policy and overall governance committee that may be aware of the policy but does not provide any governance for that policy. So it's not just about having an AUP. I love the conversation around security awareness and reinforcement through gamification or through whatever. But there are those distinct stages of policy, right? That comes with control. Enforcement is an enforcement manual or automatic, where I fail on a security awareness exercise. Is there automatic enforcement somewhere that is also in place to make sure that me, as the human that failed at the AUP, that there's something, there's a backup for me that manually or automatically enforces that I stay within policy, and then that overall governance.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to both of you. So right now, if there's any other questions, let us know, type them in. If you have something that comes up at a later time, I'm going to put my contact information there. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to email them over and I can get them to the panelists. So I am going to put that here. Also, in addition, if you have any support that's needed, again, you're hiring cyber professionals, looking for positions yourself, definitely reach out to myself. Some additional things. So O'Shea, you have any stuff about your company you want to share real quick, events coming up? Same for you, Mark. Anything that you want to add that's in the foreseeable future that, some of our listeners right now and even the people that come back for the recording may benefit from?
I'll go first, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm doing a lot of work for my late father-in-law's foundation, Paul K. Fernandez Foundation. We focus on STEAM and civic engagement. One of my core passions right now is informing communities that I support on properly handling disinformation, not trusting everything, but verifying. And so one of our first programs is going to be a webinar with local politicians in and around the Boston area on how to mitigate disinformation, how to handle it. And so that will be coming up very shortly.
Great. Thank you. O'Shea, how about yourself?
So from my side, one of the organizations I started, SkiCon, the shirt I'm wearing actually, that wasn't planned, but I've been working from home, so it's t-shirt, dress code. Yeah, we'll have the second annual SkiCon the first week of March. So that is a conference where in person, typically we would meet up at a mountain, Loon Mountain in New Hampshire, ski and snowboard, and have a few talks during the day. We're going to do this virtually, but we'll open up the CFP later this week. We're just going to have about 5 talks, and then we're going to ask people to send in footage of them skiing and snowboarding and add that into one of the breakout rooms, so we can still get the sense of community, the sense of having winter sports. and just do it virtual and then look to come back stronger in 2022 and actually be outside. One of the organizations I work with, a nonprofit, Blacks in Cyber, or BIG, our Winter Summit is coming up next weekend. So definitely navigate to the BIG website or just ping me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Happy to offer some more information there, but it'd be great to have some more support as we build out this initiative, building more people of color into cybersecurity, opening the door, or maybe kicking down the door and having right. Different perspectives in security.
Great. Awesome. And information I'll share, I'll get the contact details from Mark and O'Shea of what they'd like to share, so you can connect with them directly with any questions as well. I'm also going to, kind of give it up to Lisa Kendall. She's put this together for us, so she's amazing. She's marketing on my team. She's going to share a little bit about some of the stuff that we have coming up for you as well. So feel free to check out our, cybersn.com. We have plenty of events, blogs, things that we share on there. And we can also make introductions and help you to, reach O'Shea as well as Mark and Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share real quick about Day of Security, which is an event we have coming up. CyberSN's a founding supporter of this conference, and through our nonprofit work with Secure Diversity, which if you've known us a long time, used to be called Brain Babe. And Brain Babe was created with the mission of training the brain, giving opportunities for career advancement to women in security. We started with the so-called Booth Babe crowd and said, why can't those babes be brainy and work in security and have the career success and achievement that everyone else working in cyber has. We have a desperate need for talent. We're short 500,000 people just in the US, and we desperately need more women. The highest count they can get to is 24%, which includes a lot of folks who spend only about 25% of their time in security. So if you ask a hiring manager, what percentage of women, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a company that reported a 25% level, and which means we've got a lot of work to do. And so one of the main ways we're tackling that is through the Day of Security Conference. Registration went live today, as did the call for proposals. Dayofsecurity.com is the website. You can see everything linked out here on the homepage. The sponsorship drive is live as well, and Secure Diversity and Lookout is essentially the core team that now is driving this. There's some folks with other organizations as well, but those are the two really dedicating resources and time and energy, myself included, as the Director of Communications and Marketing for Secure Diversity for 5 years. Virtual conference March 23rd. So we've got about 2 months, a lot of different sponsorship levels. This is actually getting updated today. We've added a new VIP level for this year. So if your organization, has a budget for supporting diversity in security, supporting staffing, career development training, all of the attendees are women, all of the speakers are women. Very unique conference in that regard. All are welcome to sponsor. And the only reason we do that is because we want to celebrate the achievements and empowerment of women, create a safe space for learning, training, and career support, have really open and honest dialogues about the challenges and obstacles in the industry, and also do some hands-on training. So it's hands-on keyboards or whatever track you choose. We have reworked our conference tracks for 2021, and we're all really excited about that. So you just come to the conference tracks page to submit a proposal here. It links you to a Google form that's not too painful, I promise. I manage submissions for our company, and so it is informed by a speaker manager who hates obnoxious speaker registration submission forms. We tried to just ask what's going to get us to the info we want. And then we've got 5 tracks this year. So overall cyber guidance, red team skills, these are hands-on keyboard tracks, blue team skills, GRC, which we found a large segment of our attendee population belongs to or is hoping to get into. And then a new track this year, which is exciting for us at CyberSN, on emotional intelligence, leadership, and teamwork. We talk a lot about this internally. Our CEO, Deidre Diamond, has a sociology and criminal justice degree. She tells everybody she meets, and it makes her interested in how people tick, which is a really great personality trait when you're a recruiter and you have to try to help solve problems and make connections for people. And so, these are all really important business skills in any industry, but in security in particular, we've got a need to develop our soft skills, to train on EQ, not just focusing on the technology, but also on the interpersonal stuff that comes up that's unique to our industry, being that we are first responders. And then, registration is on the Hopin platform this year, which if you have not had a chance in this past year to participate in a event hosted on Hopin, let me be the one to tell you that they are pretty good at what they do. None of these platforms can replicate the live experience. It's just not possible. We're not in a room together. You don't get that magic, chill, goosebumps up the arm quite as easily as you do in a room full of people clapping and really into what's going on. And at the same time, we feel that this platform is really going to let us replicate as much as we are able to. So we're able to highlight great sponsors. We're going to have a career expo with job postings. Our conferences are known for getting people jobs. So our sponsors come in. We include job postings in front of our audience and in front of our Slack with those sponsorship packages. Those are worth a lot of money. If you've ever researched how much it costs to post jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed, it's very expensive. Our sponsorships actually save you money on that in that regard. And it gets those job postings in front of this big community of women. We can host up to 1,000 people this year. That's a big change too. Our highest watermark prior to this was about 350 all in, including attendees, sponsors, and speakers. And that's just because we couldn't afford to feed 1,000 people lunch. So now that it's online, we don't have to do that. You guys can eat your own lunch and come join us for free. All women are welcome to register, whether you're technical or not. We just ask that you have some sort of background in tech. That could be someone like me, who's a marketer. I am a woman in security, even though I am not a security technologist. I do work to support other women, and that's what this is about. So please share with your networks and help us fill in registration, fill in these great sponsors. We've got about 7 or 8 companies confirmed so far for sponsorship, and call for proposals open today. So we're looking forward to see what rolls in for that.
And just to add, Lisa, and to kind of everyone that's here now and joining later and listening in, you do get with those sponsorships actually discount services for us to recruit for jobs for you, which if you've worked with us in the past and you're looking to fill a role but don't have the budget, see if you can, kind of steal from Peter to pay for Paul, so you can kind of get money from someplace else to get money to actually cover the cost of one of your searches. So keep us in mind for that. But I appreciate everyone's time today. Lisa?
Sorry, I was going to say CyberSN and Lookout both have pretty generous donations that come with some of those packages. Lookout's donating the access to their threat intelligence report, which at the VIP level is like a $75,000 discount. And CyberSN's services cost a bit of cash too, because we are very good at what we do. We are experts in our field, and we specialize specifically in cyber roles. So that discount could really help you, get in under head cap there.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. And O'Shea and Mark, thank you for everything. Truly appreciated, and hope everybody has a wonderful day and stays warm. And I hope, we see each other soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.